Just how close are the Packers to the Philadelphia Eagles, who are in the Super Bowl? Well, people I talked to on Radio Row split on that one. Let's hear from them on today's Locked On Packers from Radio Row in New Orleans.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. A loaded day here on Locked On Packers. Louie DiBiase from Locked On Eagles joins me to talk about, okay, the Packers aren't here, the Eagles are. Why is that? What is the gap? How can they close it? Then we have Carmen Vitali from Fox Sports, who doesn't think the gap is that big. And then just for fun, my guy Greg Braggs from CHGO. We talk about the Bears, we talk about Ben Johnson, we talk about the rivalry, we talk about all the good stuff. Let's get into it on a Super Bowl Radio Row, Locked On Packers. Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans, and the Eagles, they beat the Packers on the way to being here. Louie DiBiase from Locked On Eagles joins me from Radio Row. And Lou, the question that I've been trying to get answered this week, that I've been asking everybody that I could ask, off the record, on the record, all the good stuff, is the difference between the Packers and the Eagles. What does that gap look like? To you, when you look at the Packers, you say, okay, this is why they're not as good as the Eagles. What is your gut reaction to that?
Yeah, I do think it's rare the Eagles have such a complete roster. I would probably say it's just the depth on both sides of the ball. Because the Packers, you could argue they kind of have a quarterback that's in a similar tier. I think their coaching staff is just as good. I think they're a couple alphas away on both sides, especially in the trenches, right? I think on the offensive and defensive line, that's where the Eagles have the advantage, I think, over most teams in the NFL, especially in the NFC. So I'd really say it's probably up front. But it's just the totality of the roster. The Eagles are just, it's a rare year where they have very little holes. So I think it's hard to replicate that from year to year with the Eagles or any team in the NFL. But I'd probably say it's up front. It's in the trenches. I think they need to, it's easier said than done to find their Jalen Carter or their Jordan Mailata. But I'd probably say it's in the trenches. That's where the Eagles have the advantage over pretty much anybody. But they're not far off when it comes to their quarterback, weapons, and coaching staff. And those are maybe the three main parts you need for a contender.
How much of the core of what you think that they are this year versus last year? Because you look at the defense, it is light years ahead of what it was last year with mostly the same, at least front personnel. So how much of that is just, hey, if you have the right coach, you're going to be able to maximize your personnel in a different kind of way?
I think that has most to do with it, because the Eagles actually have the youngest starting defense in football. I mean, most of these guys are under the age of
rookies.
I think Darius Slay is the only guy over the age of 30. It's kind of unbelievable. So it kind of is. It's the coaching staff. I mean, Vic Fangio has taken a very young defense and just put everybody in the right position to succeed. I mean, just look at Cooper DeJean, for instance, a rookie corner that played on the boundary his entire collegiate career. This year is one of the best slot corners in football and is a Rookie of the Year finalist. So I think Fangio over Sean Desai is really the difference, but also they're just so much more talented and fast on the second and third level. They were old and slow in the secondary and a linebacker last year. They had a guy like Shaq Leonard playing. So I think it's the secondary youth infusion, and it's Vic Fangio just putting the pieces together.
How concerning Kellen Moore, let's say he walks out the door, he goes to New Orleans, that's the topic of conversation right now. Getting Kellen Moore in there to help with Jalen and some of the issues that he has on blitzes and some of the protection issues, how concerned would you be about a little bit of a fall off here, depending on, of course, who they can bring in and replace him with?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of par for the course, though, for Jalen Hurts' career. He would be on his 6th play caller already in Philadelphia, and he was used to that in college as well, going from Alabama to Oklahoma. I think Jalen has shown a certain floor, play caller to play caller, but it is unfortunate that because your head coach is not a play caller, consistently you're going to have this inconsistency between the play calling relationship with the quarterback, and that's unfortunate, but I don't think there's going to be a massive drop-off because Hurts and the offense have proven that there is a floor. The ceiling, though, again, it's kind of been a roller coaster over the years because of that inconsistency, but I'm confident that year after year, they'll, at least because of the talent they have, they're going to be a top 10 offense.
All right, so let's just walk through some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Kellen Moore, Milton Williams is going to have to get paid this offseason. You mentioned Darius Slay, what they're going to do there. Is there quietly a lot of pressure on this season for the Eagles because of those changes and stuff coming in the offseason?
No, absolutely. Howie Roseman said it actually yesterday in Media Day that they kind of took a risk. Part of competing for a championship is not making some in-season extensions that normally he would in the past, because he said if he signs Zach Bond or Josh Sweat but not Milton Williams, maybe these players start to play for themselves instead of the team because they want their cut too. Yeah. So he kind of took a risk by not paying anybody, and now suddenly Zach Bond's on the open market. You mentioned Milton Williams, Josh Sweat as well on the edge.
Yeah, how could I forget All-Pro Zach
Yeah,
Bond?
exactly. So it is kind of a risk, and he'll need to do better than he did after the 2022 Super Bowl run of not letting all these guys leave. But he has done a much better job of building this defense for the long term. There's a lot of guys on long-term rookie contracts, and so I don't think it'll be the rapid decline it was going from 2022 to 2023.
There's been a lot of discussion since that Packers-Eagles game. I know that there is some frustration from Packers fans about the way Brian Gutekunst handles some of his team building as it relates to Howie Roseman. What do you think separates him specifically from other GMs? Why was he able to take a 2017 team, flip it all the way around in 2022, and then not all the way, but really revamp it this year in 2024 for the 2025 Super Bowl?
Yeah, he's had off seasons where he hasn't been that great. After the Super Bowl run of 2022, it didn't work out. So Howie Roseman, like any other GM, he'll miss. He'll have bad draft classes, bad free agent signings. The Bryce Huff move was terrible this year. But what he does better than any other GM is he always tries to stay ahead of the curve, be creative in building his roster. He's never paid a running back before. This year he hands Saquon Barkley a 3-year contract. In years past, he's never drafted defensive backs in the first or second round. This year he drafts Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. He's always trying to find the market inefficiency where the league is going one way, he's trying to go the other way to stay ahead of the curve. So I think that's what he does best, is he learns from his mistakes, and I think he's creative in trying to stay ahead.
Okay, so that means, I guess, Brian Gutekunst has got to draft a receiver in the first round. I don't know. He's actually done a lot in the in free agency to handle all that. So if you could just say, okay, let me just wave a magic wand and add a player to the Packers that would close down that gap. Not from any team, but that they could either reasonably trade for, sign this season, or draft. Who would it be?
Can they trade for a wide receiver? Can you get – I think they're one alpha away as a pass catcher from being that team. They have a bunch of B+, B-
if you could go out and get Devontae Adams.
Get Devontae Adams back, or is DK Metcalf available? Or the Seahawks saying, we're stuck in this purgatory where we're not competing for titles. We have JSN. He broke out last year. Can you get that wide receiver one? Because you got a bunch of twos. I like Watson. I like Dobbs. I like Jaden Reed. But I think the Eagles, when they took that next step, it was by adding A.J. Brown. Yeah. They took Jalen Hurts' game to the next level. Devontae Smith is a really good player, but A.J. was the alpha they didn't have. Exactly. Yeah. And Saquon added to that, but A.J. was the first one to do that. So if they could add a true wide receiver one this year, I think that could really take Jordan Love's game to the next level.
Okay, now not everyone thinks the gap between the Eagles and the Packers is that big, or doesn't think that they need to make a big splash to get it there. Carmen Vitali from Fox Sports tells you why next. Looking for tickets for your next big event? Maybe a last-minute ticket to the big game next week? Whether it's a concert, a comedy show, a game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. Gametime Picks gives you curated deals that makes it easy, simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. Plus, the seat view, you can see what you're getting at the venue, exactly what it looks like before you buy. And the best part, you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. All right, we're here, Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans. Our pal Carmen Vitali from Fox Sports joins me now. Good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
This is my favorite thing because it's like camp people I don't see in person.
Yes,
I
that's
see
true.
once a year, every year.
Yes.
So here we are, and the Packers aren't here.
No.
Which is kind of a bummer. But the Lions aren't here.
I know. None of the NFC North teams are.
None of those NFC North teams.
I know. One and done for all of them.
Did we just wildly overrate this division, or what happened?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, I don't think we overrated the division because this division is still going to be extremely competitive going forward, and the Bears are now hoping to add to that with the Ben Johnson splash hiring. I think a huge reason why the Bears did finally do something that they've never done before is because they realized the rest of the teams in this division are set up to not only be successful now, but down the road. I mean, all of these teams have longevity, stability. They have guys under team control for multiple years, like cornerstones under team control for multiple years. So I think the Bears are just finally like, oh God, we got to do something because it's not going to get easier anytime soon.
The Lions, though, Aaron Glenn is out. He's in New York now. Ben Johnson in the division, which my pal Matt Derry over at Locked On Lions not super happy about. We were like, we need to manifest him to Jacksonville or to Las Vegas. That did not happen.
No, it didn't.
But to what degree would you be worried from a Lions perspective that there's this brain drain phenomenon here?
It was interesting because Ben Johnson said it at his press conference where he was like, honestly, the structure of everything is built. The runway is there already in Detroit, that it doesn't even really matter who the coordinator is, which I also thought was kind of like petty on his part.
Yeah.
But it was basically just saying, I mean, with all the talent they have, and not only the fact that they've developed their own players, but Dan Campbell and his staff have been able to develop coaches. You see guys like Kelvin Shepard getting the DC job, getting promoted. You've seen multiple guys now moving up kind of in those ranks and then pulling from other places. They just landed Casey Rogers from the Buccaneers for their D-line coach.
Someone the Packers wanted a lot.
Yes, he had offers from multiple teams, and pretty much every team in the NFC North, and chose the Lions because he believes in what they're doing and how to kind of they're
coached with Dan Campbell too.
Yes, he did. So there's all of this that I'm not worried about the Lions because, again, the roster is constructed in a way that they have guys like Aiden Hutchinson under team control till 2026, Jahmyr Gibbs till 2027. So like stuff like that where it really, not that it doesn't take a crazy person to be able to get those guys going, but you have all that talent and it makes your job really easy as a coach.
It does, although we've seen the difference. I mean, we talked to Louie DiBiase from Locked On Eagles about the gap in talent from last year to this year, not huge, but then they add Vic Fangio. And he's a force multiplier. Like that coaching piece can be really, really big. Dan Campbell built this incredible staff. There's no guarantee he can replace it to the same level.
No, there's not.
But we have seen like Sean McVay, he just like keeps finding, I don't know where he keeps finding these guys from. Unbelievable that they're able to do this. The Packers starting to run into this a little bit. Jeff Hafley loses Anthony Campanile. Derek Ainsley interviews over in Atlanta. What did you think as this Packers team was trying to revamp on the fly with the coaching piece of this with Jeff Hafley? What did you make of what you saw from them this year?
Honestly, I was very impressed with how much taking the ball away masked, kind of the early bumps in the road, right? Like you weren't getting pressure. There just wasn't that formidable front seven, D-line, all that kind of stuff getting to the quarterback.
They expected to.
Which they expected to, but at the same time, you had a guy like Xavier McKinney who we knew was going to make this whole thing go under Jeff Hafley because safeties are the most important position in his scheme. And you saw the takeaways kind of mask all of these issues so that down the stretch, like towards the back end of the season, they were getting pressure. They were starting to figure it out. They were starting to affect the quarterback, and like better than most teams. In fact, I believe they were top 5 in pressure percentage for the last 6 weeks of the season or so. And so they went into the postseason where you felt like they were a complete team, which is why it made it such a shock that they were one and done in the postseason, because you really felt like, all right, this team, Jordan, but none of them played their best. And I think that was the main issue here. And you need more out of guys on that front. I do think that there is something to changing schemes, especially when that scheme has been in Green Bay for 15 years. You go from a 3-4 to a 4-3 for the first time in forever. And your roster has, for generations now, been built to accommodate a 3-4. And that's why you saw Preston Smith go at the trade deadline. That's why it was so much of this season, I think, for Jeff Hafley was just figuring out his personnel, which guys could make the jump, which guys they needed to get rid of, who they now need. And I really do think that they're going to figure it out. You need to give these guys time. We want results like right then and there, but when you're switching over an entire scheme, an entire staff, all of that kind of stuff, it just takes a little bit of time.
Look at Edgerrin Cooper. I mean, the first half of the year, he's making splash plays here and there. In the second half, he's like the best linebacker in the NFL.
Yes.
So it's funny. We were here last year, not here, but at Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And everyone that I talked to was like, Jordan Love, huh?
Yeah.
And then this year, it's sort of like, Jordan Love, huh? and I don't know what to make of that. What was different this year to you? I mean, why weren't they able to take that jump, to your mind?
Yeah, I really do think that the injury had a lot to do with it, because we know these guys too, and you know Jordan Love too as well. He's no exception. He's going to downplay absolutely everything. And he's going to say, I mean, this is the same team where, Aaron Rodgers talked about like, oh, the thumb injury is no big deal. And his last season in Green Bay. And that was clearly an issue for him.
Yeah.
So I think there's like, and that's the culture at so many different places, is like, no, downplay it, it's no big deal. I do think that the injuries were a huge deal. And especially like the stop-start of it all, where it took for like a really long time to even get into a rhythm. And that there's something to that. And especially then, even when Jordan Love would get into the rhythm after playing a few games, then Christian Watson would go out. Romeo Doubs was out.
Jaden Reed goes out.
Jaden Reed goes out, right. Like, you had so many guys in and out of the lineup that you just weren't operating at your full extent. And I think that there's something to be said there for staffing, for development, all of that kind of stuff, where you need to kind of figure out a workaround. But I do think that Matt LaFleur is so good at in-game adjustments, at adjustments throughout the season. You saw those guys before and after their bye week, and it was night and day on both sides of the ball. Yeah. And I think that that's not a coincidence. That's Matt LaFleur making adjustments, but you just don't necessarily have the opportunity to do that on a week-to-week basis, and you can take advantage of it when you do have those 2 weeks off or whatever, 2 weeks.
Do they need to make a big move?
I don't think so, because they're the Packers. Like, it was crazy to see them do the Josh Jacobs move. It was crazy to see them do the Xavier McKinney move. And on the other side of it, it all really does make sense, because you wanted the run game for Jordan Love to be able to rely on that now that Aaron Jones was gone. Yeah. You knew that you needed a dude at safety to run Jeff Hafley's scheme. But now when you're not going through any of that drastic turnover, changing a quarterback, changing a defensive coordinator, I think you just let the guys gel, and you do what this organization has done for years and decades and generations of, you draft really well, you bring them up through the Green Bay way, and it ends up working out.
It does. It hasn't worked out finished quite the way that they wanted the last, decade.
They still made the postseason.
I know, I'm just saying that the expectations are different. It is funny to hear from Packer fans and then the people outside Packer fandom.
Right. The rest of us are like, you're spoiled.
Yeah, you're fine, is what they're saying. Yeah. Well, where can people find more of what you're doing?
The best way to do it is just go to my social channels, because I do a bunch of different stuff with a bunch of different people, and it's really fun. My main stuff is all on foxsports.com though. Yep. But go to Carmi V on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. I'm much more active now on Blue Sky. I kind of just retweet things on Twitter because I'm trying to phase that out. But Blue Sky is where it's at, guys.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. We'll finish up today's Locked On Packers with Craig Braggs, Bears fan, Packers antagonist, which they probably say about me. That's next on Locked On Packers from Radio Row. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game. Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to get it. Pair that with one correct pick and you're cashing out. Plus, promo tab, check it out. Tail the super sweet milli winners, big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. All right, Locked On Packers, Radio Row. Now, the Bears aren't in the Super Bowl and may never be in the Super Bowl, but my guy Greg Braggs from CHGO, a.k.a. Chuggo, joins me now. And there's plenty to talk about when it comes to Chicago, right?
So that's right.
where should we start? Ben Johnson, Super Bowl, is it over? Like, should everyone just go home? Is it Chicago Bears raising the next one?
I mean, full and well, we are the champions of the offseason every year. So we have already won that title again this year, and rightfully so, right? I mean, the Bears get the top head coach in Ben Johnson and a pretty impressive coaching staff. It took about a week for that to facilitate, but, obviously I think we all understand Ben Johnson's prowess calling plays and what he can bring as an offensive mind. But when you see the coaching staff and some of the guys that have come over from Detroit and things like that, I think that was a big question and a big hurdle to see, are you going to be that Kyle Shanahan? Are you going to be that Sean McVay? Because you got to start to create that tree. And when you're a young coach, like, who is your tree? Well, Antoine Randall and JT Barrett just left Dan Campbell and Detroit, who was one of the best teams in football, and said, I'm following you, Ben Johnson, to the 5-win Bears. So I think that speaks volumes to the coach that Ben Johnson is.
It had to have been cathartic and heartening to hear all of these guys talk about, I wanted to go to Chicago. Ben Johnson, I wanted to be in Chicago. And talking about, hey, this is the place to be, because that's what Bears fans have been saying forever, even when it wasn't true. So now, like, does it feel like you're actually closer to that reality?
It always feels like it's closer as a Bears fan, right? Like, we did this last offseason, and even the offseason before, even when you came on my show, like, we talked about Justin Fields, like, getting ready to take that next step, and we didn't really know who Jordan Love was. So, like, we continue as Bears fans to kind of go through this turnstile of hope. And I think law of averages, just as a Cubs fan, I feel confident that eventually we're going to hit.
Somewhere in 120 years.
Right, exactly. And so the hope is it's a little shorter time frame than that. But time is on the young man's side. I don't know if I'm getting any younger. But at the same time, they're putting themselves in the best position to get it right. Does it guarantee it? No, I think us as Bears fans have learned that we've been spurned before. But at the same time, you get the number 1 pick last year in Caleb Williams. He has all the talent. He still does. And to combine him with a coach that is lauded as a guy that can, really bring the most and make those easy completions. When you look at what Jaden Daniels did in Washington, unbelievably impressive. And there's going to be a lot of fans that say the Bears messed up once again. But I think
I am those fans.
And that's fine. I mean, you can't take away what Jaden Daniels did. He was phenomenal. I mean, he's Lamar Jackson, right? He's every bit. But he also has a great play caller in Cliff Kingsbury, who understood who he was as a quarterback and made those easy reads, got him into a rhythm, and Caleb Williams could never find a rhythm this year. And that being said, through all the turmoil, through all the coaching, he had 2 different head coaches, 3 different offensive coordinators, the most offensive line combinations in football, and through all that, ended up tongue-in-cheek stat here, but with the most total yards for a quarterback in franchise history for Chicago. Low bar, I understand that, and all Packers fans would immediately say that. But at the same time, I think that puts into perspective exactly what Caleb Williams' floor is, as opposed to like what the ceiling of some previous quarterbacks were.
How nervous are you about some of the bad things, the taking of the sacks, the holding of the ball with Caleb Williams? Because he did against the Packers like 2 times, drove the ball down the field, and really should have won both of those games with field goals. That being said, there's plenty of things to be concerned about. So how concerned about them are you?
Yeah, I mean, if they don't cross that threshold for Caleb Williams, it won't work. Like, Ben Johnson has to get him to understand how to play in structure better. Not that he can't play in structure, but it just where you have to really get, you just have to be stubborn about it. You can't let go of the rope and try to bail out of the backside of the pocket. And when you take the most sacks in the league, 68? I mean, almost hitting 70. I mean, that's a number you can't hit. And that's not an offensive line stat. That's a quarterback stat. And especially when you look at the pressure to sack ratio, that's something that I think Bears fans need to acknowledge is all quarterbacks get pressured, and it's how you handle that pressure. And Caleb Williams, it's not just him, but at the same time, there's a lot that he has to clean up. And can Ben Johnson break through to him? That's going to be the key. Everyone understands Caleb Williams has all the talent in the world, but if he and Ben Johnson don't connect, it'll never work. So he's got to take the tough coaching that he was begging for at the end of the year and take that into year 2 with a professional and mature mindset to say, these are the things I need to clean up. I can't just blame it on failures of coaches behind me.
Where are Bears fans right now on Jordan Love?
You know, it's interesting. If you were to ask me a year ago, and even still, people think Jordan Love is mid. I think most Bears fans think Jordan Love is mid.
At least they like to say that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like telling themselves that, right? I've always thought, I've always been impressed by Jordan Love. He's not afraid to throw in windows. He takes chances. He's got a great arm. He's got flexibility and mobility in the pocket. He doesn't
take sacks.
He doesn't take sacks. And so, you know, there's a risk-reward factor with the gunslinger mentality he has at times. But at the same time, when you consider his age, and now it's 2 years where you fall short, you guys' expectations getting into the playoffs, you have a higher standard than what Bears fans have had to this point. So it is interesting to see how this is going to develop over the next few years, because if he can't hit a certain threshold, okay, you paid him, you got a quarterback, but is he enough to win you a championship? Because I think for what most Bears fans hope is, he's just good enough to not win you a championship, but not bad enough for you to want to replace him.
I think that is what a lot of teams face with I think most quarterbacks kind of fall into that area where it's like if you make things nice, they can succeed. We'll see if there's more than that with Jordan Love. Is the expectation with Ben Johnson year one, we got to go make the playoffs or this is a failure?
Well, and that's always the problem in Chicago is putting the cart before the horse in terms of expectations. I'm like literally speaking to myself here.
Physician, heal myself.
It is one of those things where I get lost in the offseason sauce. By the time training camp hits, I've completely lost my mind. I'll start at 8 wins and I'll move all the way up to 12, 13, and I'm Adam rank before the season starts. just a full on meatball, and we can't.
I saw him walking around here.
Yeah, Adam's the best, and he's a mentor for rightfully so because we're meatballs. But it is one of those things where I have to just continually tell myself like this is a process, and if we can't, as the Bears organization, if they can't embrace the longer process to earn what the stability of some franchises like Green Bay has had at quarterback, they're never going to get it. Now, sticking with Mitch or sticking with Justin, just because you stick with them doesn't mean it's going to work. But at some point, continuity has to fall into place. You have to start building into the trenches. You have to start giving your quarterback, your coordinator, your play callers time to gel and find that chemistry. You know, we talked to Caitlin Sharkey. She covers Chicago Bears. She used to cover the Green Bay Packers. And the number one thing she talked about was culture. And what crumbled in Chicago this year, it really wasn't the quarterback. I mean, he's a rookie. He had faults. What crumbled was their culture. They all started turning on the coaches. They're talking in the media. Yeah. They're not playing discipline. They're not playing with heart. And the good teams, the Steelers, the Packers, the perennial every year, they're competitive. Their culture is tight. And the Bears keep rolling over coaches, keep rolling over GMs, keep rolling over their leaders of their team and their quarterbacks. So there's no culture. It's just a reset of a culture every 2 years, which leads to a process that's been broken.
All right, let our listeners know where they can find all the stuff that you're putting out there, your Twitter handle, all the good stuff.
Yeah, if you want to be triggered by me, make sure you follow at GBraggsJr23. That's my personal account, and I'll have some fun with you. But at CHGO_Bears, and then CHGO Sports on Twitter. We cover all sports in Chicago, and obviously we cover the Bears, and it's a lot of fun. And being able to do stuff like this is a dream. I'll never take this stuff for granted. It's just a lot of fun, and I enjoy your content. I know Bears fans give you a hard time.
No, not Bears fans.
But I see through your hearty exterior where you pick on Bears fans, and I see the heart in you. And so that's why I always enjoy talking with you, Peter.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks to Louie. Thanks to Carmen. Thanks to Greg for joining me on Locked On Packers. We've got some players starting in tomorrow. Braden Narveson, former Packers kicker, joins us on the show. Josh Jacobs, A.J. Dillon, they're coming later in the week. It's kind of a slow day here, still ramping up the momentum. It's packed with media people, but not a lot of big name. Former players, current players, not a lot happening on Radio Row here. It's going to all come going tomorrow. We'll talk to you then, so you can stay locked on Packers.